People of Reddit who have practiced or witnessed acts of the witchcraft, voodoo, or the occult. What was the strangest / most unexplainable thing you saw? NSFW. When I was a teen, a bunch of my friends went through a Wiccan phase. I honestly thought it was a bunch of hooey, but played along for the most part. Because hey, they cold got into drugs or horses instead, right? But despite thinking it bullshit, there was one moment that made me question things. Us girls had met up to hang out, and one was brandishing a wooden walking stick. "I have poured my energy into this totem," she declared, then started passing it around the room. The others cooed about how they could feel the power within as they held it. Course someone handed me the stick eventually. I could barely contain my eye roll as I took it. As I held the walking stick, it sent a tingling sensation up my arms. I passed it on quickly. Not as dramatic as some of the stories here, but gosh, that was weird. Friends don't let friends become horse girls. Not sure if this counts, but when I was in high school I had this sudden bout of nightmares and sleep paralysis. I wasn't going through a stressful time or anything, and I don't freak out easily. I grew up watching 80s and 90s horror films, and I normally sleep with total darkness and doors closed. These nightmares were super sudden and happened almost every night. It was constant sleep paralysis, where my room was on fire, or there were bats thrashing around above me, or there was a figure hovering over my body and I couldn't breathe, the classic. Sometimes my speakers let out strange frequency type sounds, even when it was switched off. Things would fall off my shelves, etc. My mom would always find me sleeping on the couch the next morning with the TV on because it was so crazy. Suddenly it all stopped, and when I told my mom, she admitted that she had sought advice from a priestess who engraved a blessing for me on a silver pendant and instructed my mom to place it in my room. She didn't want to tell me to see if it would work. I've never had such episodes since. This is a pretty mundane story, but I feel it captures something of what real magic might be like. I used to work in an occult bookstore. We sold mostly psychic nonsense and spiritualist new agey stuff, but there was a bookcase in the back with the real expensive stuff, and the owner was this real old, real wise man. This woman used to come in when I was working, and she'd just talk for ages and ages. It was a non-stop stream of bullshit. She knew this. She did that. Did you know about this? On and on. She'd suck up a ton of time. If you've ever heard the term energy vampire, it would apply here. When she left, you'd just feel drained. One day she comes in while the owner is there. She walks up to the counter and starts her shtick, and he's very polite and listening. But she just sort of runs out of steam. Like, within 60 seconds. She hums and haws a bit and then walks out of the store. It would usually take me an hour to get rid of her, and he shut her down in a minute flat with a smile on his face. I mention it to him and he says, "There's a circle of protection painted under the floor for a reason." When I was about 6 or 7 years old, I ran into my bedroom to play, but when I went past my bed I saw a grey man in tattered grey clothes. He was wearing a beat up trench coat, a white shirt and some plain grey slacks. He looked absolutely terrified that I had seen him. I ran out of the room to find my parents and never saw the dude again. By the way, does anybody have extra subs I might follow for more of this kind of thing? I'm not a religious person, and if anything only believe in doing good and honoring whatever positive energy there is. What happened to me still makes me feel like surely someone was pranking me. I'm not even sure how to share this story. It still freaks me out. I want to, as a logical person, believe there's no God, or at the very least no such thing as evil spirits, and this has always shaken me enough to question it. I've only ever told this story to my brother. When I was in high school I dated a guy who, to be frank, was always an asshole, but towards the end of our relationship started worshipping Satan. One night while on the phone, this was before cell phones, he said he sent something to pay me a visit that night. Not taking him seriously at all. I laughed like, yeah, okay, whatever. We hung up the phone. I fell asleep. In the middle of the night, while asleep, I started feeling the worst stomach cramps I've ever had, tossing and turning. Waking up and trying to go back to sleep. It would not go away unless I opened my eyes and sat up. I settled, trying to sleep, and there was a whisper. It sounded like a man's voice. Hey. It was right in my ear. I opened my eyes, looked around, nothing. Closed my eyes again, drifted off, and again felt cramping to the point of sickness in my stomach as another whisper sounded, "Wake up." I sat up. The sick feeling stopped. At this point I'm fully freaked out. The whisper sounded like someone hovering over me. I pulled the covers over my head and just tried to lay still and pretend I didn't exist and that shit didn't just happen. Minutes went by and I thought everything was fine. Then suddenly tapping started in my room. Like someone was walking though and smacking things randomly. I'm not even ashamed to admit that I bolted from my bed and ripped my bedroom door open and ran out. While in Africa I had heard rumors of witchcraft and lighting. Believed none of it. One day while I was doing humanitarian work in a township, basically big subdivisions of small cinder block houses, I saw a huge red bolt of lighting come out of the sky and hit a shack off in the distance. Not a cloud in sight. Still have no explanation of how TF that happened. Everyone in the township said witchcraft. And I gotta say that along with lots of other crap I saw, I'm a full believer that witchcraft exists. These stories remind me of my youth. I once met one guy on the internet who practiced stuff. Before we ever met, I told him to make a summoning circle, like the ones you do when trying to reach a deceased person, but to reach me instead of someone deceased. At that time, I was quite delusional about my body. I considered my chest narrow and fat, but everyone else would say I'm very broad, strong and muscular, but we only had each other's close-up face selfies. No way to see the body types, so he made the summoning circle and tried to summon me, but it didn't seem to work. Then we both went to sleep. The next morning, he said he had a dream about me and told me that he saw me looking very strong and muscular with broad shoulders. But I also had a dream where I saw him. He was very skinny. Then we met in real life to verify that I was exactly like in his dream. He was exactly like in my dream. He even had the same scent about him. I was into witchcraft for a little while in high school. I was a white witch, or at least trying to be, and I got really into tarot cards. Being a dumb teenager, I didn't know how to properly use them, and instead of using them as an extension of my subconscious, I instead thought of them as their own entity. I would speak to them as if they were their own person. I never got good readings from them. After a while of using them, I would have a feeling of something watching me around my house, especially at night. It would follow me around the house and would be in my closet when I would go to bed. The feeling of anxiety and dread that I felt kept getting worse and worse to the point where I wouldn't sleep at night. At some point I stopped practicing and it didn't go away. It would take a solid few months until it stopped. After it stopped, I went to look for my cards and my crystals. I could not find them. To this day, 5 years later, I still have no idea what happened to them. I have no doubt in my mind that whatever was following me had something to do with it. To be honest, when I go to my parents' house even now I still feel like it's watching me, but it's not as intense as before. My sister was / is really into occult / Wiccan / witchcraft kind of stuff. I think she meant to be Wiccan, but a 13-year-old isn't incredibly discerning. Around the time she got into it, our house started to get incredibly creepy. We would see things move out of the corner of our eyes. Nobody wanted to be home alone. Nobody wanted to be in the living room at night. At first, we could blame it on the house and the land. Then we moved. Not just houses, but continents. The weird stuff followed. All of it was always centered around my sister and her room. And it was always aggravated when we did serious cleaning, and especially when we moved. The height of it was when we were moving back to the US. We had 2 different flight groups. My mom and sister left 6 weeks before the rest of us to pick the new house, while my dad, brother and I cleaned and packed at the old house. We heard thumping from my sister's room. The windows and doors would open and close on their own, not possible from just the wind, and shadows would move wildly under the door pretty much every night, even with the blinds closed. I'm not sensitive / discerning of that kind of stuff, but it was plain as day even to me. It was only my sister finally moved out of our next house and we cleaned out her room that it all ended. Whatever it was tied to my sister and any sort of disorder / uncleanliness. When I was a young kid, me and my friends would begin to ghosts, the paranormal, the occult, or anything else creepy. I was a self-identifying witch, and we would often go ghost hunting in local places. We even came up with a theory that our school used to be an ancient, cursed burial ground. The thing we loved most was Ouija boards, which is where this story begins. One day, my friend comes up to me and tells me about an experience he had. He had made a makeshift Ouija board and used it on his school bus. He had contacted a ghost that called itself and it was trying to warn us about something. Me and my other friend were curious and wanted to know more. I had recently gotten an actual Ouija board for Christmas, and I suggested that we should have a proper session at my house. So we all come over one day and set things up. Salt circle, candles, and lavender as a substitute for sage. We start the session, and things go wrong immediately. The board is saying weird and cryptic things. So we ask its name. The ghost goes by T. We ask what it is, and it just says proxy. A quick Google search of the word made us realize that T was a proxy for something a lot darker. Us being kids, we thought it was the Ouija board demon whose name started with a Z. But now I'm a little unsure exactly what it was proxying for. Suddenly, we heard a loud noise coming from the closet. My friends went over to look, and I stayed back to not take my fingers off the planchette and accidentally end the session without saying goodbye. They both screamed and ran out. They both claimed they saw a long, black shadow white thing with tiny white eyes, curled up in the fetal position on the closet floor. We all freak out and end the session right there. I knew we had holy water in the other room, so we went to go get it. While we do, we hear another noise. We rushed back and found that the planchette, which we had taken off the board, was back on the board by itself, and all our other items were scattered around the board. We blessed the board right then and there. We talked to our ghosts a few more times, both T and A. We figured out that A comes in darkness and T comes in light. So if we wanted to talk to one or the other, we'd just turn the lights on and off. But here's the freaky part. T told my friends that he wanted to drain them of their essence, and that he was connected to their families. A told us that he was also connected, but was there to protect them. We saw the black shadow figure a few more times, most often outside our windows, watching from the street. We thought it was T. We also saw a white figure with black eyes a few times, which we thought was A. I also could not go into the basement closet without getting a terrible sense of dread. Eventually, we get the house smudged, and the sighting stopped completely. Now, I'm a proper Wiccan, and have resolved to myself to never use an Ouija board again.